Kiravus opened her eyes to darkness and the hum of alien machinery. Her head throbbed with pain, and her memories came back in broken pieces. The research station, the alarm sirens, the shadow that moved too fast to be real. She tried to move, but her wrists were bound behind her back with some kind of energy restraint that buzzed against her skin. Where was she? The last thing she remembered was collecting soil samples on the uncharted moon near Kepler 442. Her team had been laughing about something stupid. Jenkins had made a joke about alien mushrooms. Then the sky had torn open, and something massive had descended through the clouds. Now she was here, wherever here was. A door slid open with a harsh mechanical sound, and light flooded into her cell. Kira squinted against the brightness and saw shapes moving toward her. Tall shapes, impossibly tall, with too many limbs. The first creature stepped into full view, and Kira felt her blood turn to ice. It stood at least 8 feet tall, and its body was covered in scales that shimmered like oil on water. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in claws that looked sharp enough to cut through steel. Its face was a nightmare of angular bones and predatory features, with eyes that glowed a deep amber color. 2 more of the creatures followed behind the first, and they all stared at her with what she could only describe as amusement. "The soft skin awakens," the lead creature spoke, and its voice was like gravel scraping against metal. "Good. We were growing impatient." Kira forced herself to breathe, and she straightened her spine against the wall behind her. She had faced dangerous situations before. This was just another one. Fear was useful only if you controlled it. "Who are you?" she demanded, and she was proud that her voice did not shake. "Where have you taken me?" The creatures exchanged glances and made sounds that might have been laughter. "We are the Vrakthari," the leader announced with obvious pride. "We have ruled this sector of space for 10,000 cycles. Every species we have encountered has fallen before our hunts. The Kelori, the Vostuum, the crystalline mines of Sector 7. All of them now exist only in our trophy halls." Kira processed this information quickly. Apex predators who hunted sentient species for sport. This was bad, very bad. "And I am to be hunted," she said. It was not a question. The Vrakthari leader tilted its massive head and studied her with new interest. "You understand quickly for such a primitive creature." "Yes, Softskin, you will participate in what we call the Proving. It is our greatest tradition, our most sacred ritual. 1 weapon, 1 prey, 1 hunting moon. The chase typically lasts a few hours before we claim our trophy." Another Vrakthari stepped forward and tossed something at her feet. It was a pistol. Crude, ugly, clearly designed for hands smaller than their own claws. Kira looked at it and then back at her captors. 6 shots, the creature explained with a sound like crackling ice. No additional ammunition. We find it adds to the entertainment when the prey believes it has a chance. "How generous of you," Kira replied flatly. The leader moved closer and crouched down to examine her more carefully. Its amber eyes swept over her small frame, her soft skin, her blunt fingernails. "We have studied your species briefly," it said. "Humans, you call yourselves. No natural weapons, no armor, no them. You cannot see in the dark, and you cannot hear beyond a limited range. Your bodies break easily and heal slowly. Honestly, we expect you will provide perhaps an hour of sport before the end." The other Vrakthari made those laughing sounds again. Kira said nothing because she was thinking. She was thinking about everything these aliens clearly did not know. They did not know that before she became a xenobiologist for the research course, she had spent 12 years as a survival instructor for the United Earth Colonial Marines. They did not know that she had trained soldiers to stay alive on 17 different hostile worlds, from the acid swamps of Titan to the razor forests of Proxima 3. They did not know about the persistence, hunting techniques that humans had developed over 200,000 years of evolution. They did not know that her ancestors had chased mammoths across frozen tundras with nothing but sharpened sticks and stubborn determination. They saw a soft creature with no claws and no fangs. They did not see the predator hiding behind her eyes. "When does this hunt begin?" Kira asked calmly. "At dawn," the leader replied. "You will be transported to the surface tonight. The hunting moon has forests, rivers, caves. Plenty of places for you to hide and cower. We will give you until first light to run, and then we will come for you." It stood back to its full height and looked down at her with something like pity. "Do you have any final words, Softskin? Any prayers to whatever gods your primitive species worships?" Kira met its gaze without flinching. "Just one question," she said. "How many of you will be hunting me?" The Vracthari seemed surprised by the question. "6 of our finest young hunters have claimed the right to this chase. They are eager to test themselves against new prey." Kira nodded slowly and filed this information away. 6 hunters," she repeated. "That should be enough." The creature stared at her for a moment, clearly confused by her response. Then they laughed again and turned to leave. "Brave words from a dead creature," the leader called over its shoulder. "We shall see how brave you are when you hear us coming through the trees." The door sealed behind them, and Kira was alone in the darkness once more. She allowed herself exactly 30 seconds to feel the fear, to let it wash through her body and acknowledge its presence. Fear was not the enemy. Panic was the enemy. Fear could sharpen the senses and quicken the mind. Then she pushed the fear aside and began to plan. 6 hunters with superior strength, speed, and senses. 1 pistol with 6 bullets. An unknown environment with unknown dangers. The odds were terrible, but Kira had faced terrible odds before. She had survived a hull breach on the mining station Cerberus. She had walked 40 kilometers through a sandstorm on Mars with a broken radio and half a canteen of water. She had talked down a frightened recruit who was holding a live grenade with the pin removed. Humans did not survive because they were the strongest or the fastest. Humans survived because they refused to accept death as an inevitability. They adapted, they endured, they found ways to win when winning seemed impossible. The Vracthari thought they were the apex predators of this galaxy. They were about to learn otherwise. Kira closed her eyes and began mentally cataloging everything she would need to do in the first hour after landing. Shelter, water, weapons, terrain assessment. The checklist formed in her mind like an old familiar friend. Tomorrow the hunt would begin, and these alien monsters would discover the truth that every predator eventually learned when it targeted the wrong prey. Sometimes the prey bites back. The dropship doors opened and Kira was shoved into the humid air of the hunting moon. She stumbled but did not fall, and she kept her grip on the crude pistol they had given her. Behind her, the Vracthari pilot made a sound of contempt before the doors sealed shut and the vessel rose back into the darkening sky. Kira stood at the edge of a vast jungle that stretched toward distant mountains. 3 suns were setting on the horizon, painting the alien sky in shades of purple and orange. Strange birds called from the canopy above, and something large moved through the undergrowth nearby. Most prey would have started running immediately. The instinct to flee, to put distance between yourself and danger, was powerful and primal. Kira did not run. Instead, she crouched low and began to observe. What kind of trees grew here? What animals lived in this forest? Where did the water flow and where did predators likely hunt? Every detail mattered, and every piece of information could mean the difference between life and death. She spotted camera drones hovering at the tree line. The Vracthari were watching her, probably expecting entertainment. She ignored them and continued her assessment. The soil was soft and damp, good for tracking, but also good for concealment. The vegetation was dense with large leaves that would block thermal signatures. She identified 3 different water sources by listening to the sounds of flowing liquid in the distance. After an hour of careful observation, Kira began to move. Not away from danger, but toward a specific location she had identified. A rocky outcropping near a stream with natural caves and multiple escape routes. The cameras followed her, and somewhere on the orbiting ship, Vractari observers were probably confused. Why was she not running? Why was she moving so slowly and deliberately? They did not understand because they had never needed to understand. They were hunters who had never been truly challenged. They knew nothing about the science of survival. Kira reached her chosen location as the last sun disappeared below the horizon. Darkness fell quickly on this moon, but she had expected that. She worked fast, using techniques perfected over years of training. First, she gathered mud from the stream bank and covered her exposed skin. The mud would mask her heat signature and her scent. Then she collected specific plants she had identified during her walk. Some for camouflage, some for other purposes. She constructed a shelter that was nearly invisible against the rocky backdrop. She dug a small pit and lined it with sharpened stakes carved from hardwood branches. She created tripwires from the fibrous vines that grew everywhere and connected them to noise-making devices, fashioned from hollow seed pods. Her bootlaces became a garrote. A straight branch became a spear after she spent 20 minutes sharpening its tip against rough stone. She found a type of fungus that glowed faintly in the darkness and used it to create false trails. By the time the moons rose, casting silver light through the canopy, Kira had transformed a random patch of jungle into a defensive position that would make any military instructor proud. And then she waited. The Vractari hunters arrived 4 hours after midnight, descending through the atmosphere in individual drop pods. Kira heard them coming and felt the ground shake as they landed in a wide perimeter around her general location. She counted the impacts. 6, just as the leader had promised. Through the trees, she caught glimpses of their forms. Massive shadows moving with predatory grace. They carried plasma lances that hummed with deadly energy in war, sensor arrays on their heads that swept the jungle with invisible beams. "Spread out," a voice commanded in their harsh language. Kira had no translator, but she could read the tactical pattern easily. They were forming a standard hunting formation, driving toward a central point where they expected to trap their prey. What they did not expect was for their prey to have prepared the central point in advance. The first hunter found her pit trap. One moment, it was stalking confidently through the undergrowth, and the next moment the ground gave way beneath its feet. The creature roared in pain as the sharpened stakes pierced its legs, and it struggled to climb out of the hole. Its companions heard the cry and changed direction, converging on the sound. This was exactly what Kira wanted. The second trap was a deadfall. A massive log suspended by vines that released when a tripwire was triggered. The hunter never saw it coming, and the impact sent it crashing into a tree with enough force to crack its scales. Now the remaining hunters were alert and afraid. They stopped moving and began scanning the area with their sensors, searching for the heat signature of their prey. They found one. A warm spot glowing bright orange against the cool background of the jungle. The 4 hunters approached carefully, weapons raised, ready to end this humiliating chase. What they found was not Kira. It was a bundle of fermenting vegetation, generating heat as it decomposed. She had built it hours ago and placed it in the perfect location to draw attention. The real Kira was 30 meters away, hidden in a mud-covered hollow beneath a fallen tree. She watched through a gap in the roots as the hunters realized their mistake. And then she moved. The first shot from her pistol caught a hunter in the neck, the one weak point she had identified in their scaled armor. The creature fell without a sound. The second shot took another hunter in the eye as it turned toward the source of the attack. These aliens might be apex predators, but they had never learned to anticipate gunfire from their prey. Then Kira was gone, melting into the darkness like a ghost. The remaining hunters fired their plasma lances at the spot where she had been, but they hit only empty air. They spent the rest of the night searching, jumping at every sound, shooting at shadows. Kira watched them from various hidden positions, learning their patterns, identifying their weaknesses. She did not fire again. Ammunition was precious and 4 bullets were all she had left. But she let them know she was watching. A rustled branch here, a snapped twig there. Enough to keep them terrified and exhausted. When dawn came, only 2 hunters limped back to the extraction point. They had failed to find their prey, and 4 of their companions were dead or crippled. The cameras had captured everything, and on the orbiting ship, the Vrak-3 Command Council watched the footage in stunned silence. This had never happened before. The soft skin had not run. She had not cowered or begged. She had prepared, planned, and executed a defensive strategy that had humiliated the finest young hunters of their species. And now she was still out there, still armed, still dangerous. Huntmaster Krasix stared at the screen with burning amber eyes. In 10,000 cycles of the proving, no prey had ever killed a single hunter. This human female had killed 4 in one night. What is she? One of his subordinates whispered. Krasix did not answer immediately. He was beginning to suspect that they had made a terrible mistake. That they had captured something far more dangerous than a simple soft-skinned scientist. He ordered the archives to provide everything they had on the species called humans. Whatever this creature was, he intended to understand it before sending more hunters to die. The Vrak-3 Command Council gathered in the war chamber of their flagship, and none of them were laughing now. Huntmaster Krasix stood before the main display screen, watching the footage from the hunting moon for the 20th time. 4 of his hunters were dead, 2 more were badly wounded, and the prey was still alive. This is impossible, War Chief Vorath growled. One creature with a primitive weapon defeated 6 of our finest warriors. There must be some explanation. Perhaps she had hidden technology, or perhaps she received outside help. There was no outside help, Krasix replied coldly. We monitored every signal, every transmission. She was alone, just as we intended. What you see is exactly what happened. The council members shifted uncomfortably. They were not used to failure, and they did not know how to process what they were witnessing. Show me the species file, Krasix commanded. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber. It showed a rotating image of a human figure. Small, soft, utterly unremarkable. Species designation, human, the computer announced. Origin world, Earth, Sol system. Physical assessment, below average by galactic standards. No natural weapons, limited sensory capabilities, fragile skeletal structure. Recommended threat level, minimal. Minimal, Vorath repeated with a bitter laugh. 4 dead hunters and the threat level is minimal. The initial assessment was based on physical attributes alone, Krasix acknowledged. We need deeper analysis. Computer, expand the species profile. Include all available data on human evolutionary history and behavioral patterns. The display flickered and new information began scrolling across the screen. What the Vrak-3 saw made them fall silent. Humans evolved on a world with extreme environmental variation, the computer reported. Their species survived ice ages, volcanic catastrophes, and mass extinction events. They spread from their original habitat to occupy every climate zone on their planet. Deserts, frozen tundras, tropical jungles, high mountain ranges, and coastal regions. Krasix leaned forward with growing interest. How did they accomplish this without natural adaptations? They developed tool use and social cooperation to an unprecedented degree. When they could not grow claws, they created knives. When they could not grow fur, they made clothing from animal skins. When they could not run fast enough to catch prey, they invented a hunting technique called persistence predation. Explain this technique, Krasix demanded. Humans cannot outrun most prey animals over short distances, but they possess exceptional endurance. They would follow their target for hours or even days, never stopping, never resting, until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. This hunting style required extreme patience, strategic thinking, and the ability to track a single animal across vast distances. The council members exchanged uneasy glances. This was not what they had expected to hear about the soft-skinned creatures. Continue, Krasix ordered. Human society developed sophisticated methods of transferring survival knowledge between generations. They created formal training programs to teach their young how to fight, hunt, build, and survive under hostile conditions. The designation human trained refers to individuals who have undergone intensive preparation for dangerous environments. And the female we captured, Vorath asked slowly. Was she human trained? Krasix pulled up Kira's personnel file from the data they had extracted from her research station. Kira Voss, he read aloud. Position, Senior Xenobiologist. Previous occupation, Survival Instructor, United Earth Colonial Marines. 12 years of service. 17 different planetary environments. Specialty, teaching soldiers to survive in hostile territory with minimal equipment. The chamber went completely quiet. We did not capture a scientist, Krasix said finally. We captured a survival expert. A creature specifically trained to stay alive in deadly conditions and to train others to do the same. War Chief Vorath slammed his fist against the council table. Then we send more hunters. 30, 50, 100 if necessary. No single prey can stand against our full strength. Can we be certain of that? Another council member asked. Look at the footage again. She did not simply hide and wait for death. She created traps, studied our hunters, and struck at precisely the right moment. She understood our tactics better than we understood hers. She is still just one creature with 4 bullets remaining, Vorath argued. Krasix was no longer listening to the debate. He was studying the footage with new eyes, watching how Kira moved, how she planned, how she turned every element of the environment into a weapon. And he was beginning to understand something terrible. The Vrak-3 had evolved as apex predators. They had claws and strength and speed. They had never needed to develop complex survival strategies because they had never faced real threats. Humans were different. Humans had evolved surrounded by predators that were larger and stronger and faster. They had survived by being smarter, more adaptable, more determined. They had learned to use fear as a weapon, both their own fear and the fear of others. She's not acting like prey, Krasix said quietly. She's acting like a predator studying new territory. She's learning us. What do you mean? Vorath demanded. Watch how she observes the hunters before attacking. Watch how she lets the survivors escape. She is gathering information, testing our responses, identifying our weaknesses. This is not desperation. This is strategy. He turned to face the council with cold certainty in his amber eyes. And if we send more hunters without understanding what we are facing, she will destroy them too. On the planet below, Kira had no idea that she had become the subject of urgent debate. She had spent the daylight hours exploring deeper into the jungle, searching for a location that would give her even greater advantages. She found it in the cave system near the mountains, a network of tunnels that extended far underground, with multiple entrances and exits, natural choke points, and complete darkness that would neutralize the Vrak-3 visual advantages. She began preparing immediately. The caves would become her fortress, her hunting ground, her home territory. She gathered materials for torches and mapped escape routes. She identified places where tunnels could be collapsed and passages where ambush could be staged. She was tired and hungry, but she did not slow down. There would be time to rest later, or there would be no time at all. As the suns began to set again, Kira stood at the entrance to her chosen cave and looked back toward the distant jungle. Somewhere up there, the Vractari were deciding what to do next. She hoped they would send more hunters. Not because she wanted to kill, but because every hunter they sent was a hunter she could study, learn from, and use against them. Knowledge was power, and she intended to have more knowledge than her enemies. The Vractari thought they were hunting her. They did not realize that she was hunting them right back. Kira disappeared into the darkness of the caves, and the second night began. 30 Vractari hunters descended onto the hunting moon as the third dawn broke. Huntmaster Krassix had overruled the cautious voices on the council. They would end this embarrassment with overwhelming force. 30 of their finest warriors against one exhausted human with 4 bullets left. There was no scenario in which she could survive. The hunters landed in a wide formation around the cave system that their surveillance drones had identified as her hiding place. They moved with military precision, sealing every visible exit and preparing to drive her into a kill zone. War Chief Vorath led the assault personally. He was determined to claim this trophy himself and restore honor to the hunters she had humiliated. "Begin the advance," he commanded through his communicator. "Force her toward the central chamber. She has nowhere left to run." The hunters entered the caves from multiple directions, plasma lances lighting the darkness with their deadly glow. They moved carefully now, watching for traps, scanning every shadow. The first trap was exactly where they expected it. A simple tripwire connected to a rock fall. They disarmed it and continued forward, congratulating themselves on their caution. The second trap was more sophisticated. A false floor over a pit filled with sharpened stakes. Again, they spotted it in time and navigated around the danger. "She's getting desperate," one hunter reported. "These traps are obvious." She had no time to prepare properly. Vorath allowed himself a grim smile. The prey was finally behaving like prey, setting weak defenses and hoping for luck. The hunt would be over soon. They did not realize that the obvious traps were not meant to kill them. The obvious traps were meant to herd them, to guide them down specific tunnels while avoiding others. Kira had spent 2 days mapping these caves, and she knew exactly where she wanted her enemies to go. The first group of hunters entered a narrow passage and suddenly found themselves in complete darkness. The tunnel had collapsed behind them, sealing them in a chamber with no other exit. Their communicators stopped working. The rock was too thick for signals to penetrate. The second group pushed deeper into the caves, following heat signatures on their sensors. The signatures led them into a junction where 5 tunnels met. And then the signatures disappeared. What they had been tracking was not Kira, but bundles of chemically heated material placed at strategic locations. Confusion spread through the hunting party. "Report positions," Vorath demanded. "All units report." Static answered him. The cave network was disrupting their communications, and his hunters were scattered across kilometers of twisting passages. And that was when Kira began her counterattack. She knew these tunnels now. She could navigate them in complete darkness, moving by touch and memory. The Vractari were blind down here, dependent on technology that she had already learned to defeat. She struck the isolated groups one by one. A hunter separated from his companions found strange symbols carved into the tunnel wall. Vractari script that read, "I see you." He stared at the message in disbelief, and he never heard Kira drop from the ceiling behind him. Another group discovered one of their dead, arranged in a seated position with his own claws crossed over his chest. The sight paralyzed them with horror. No species had ever done this to a Vractari warrior. While they stared, Kira collapsed the tunnel entrance and sealed them in darkness. She did not need to kill them all. She needed to break them. The Vractari had never experienced fear. Not real fear, not the kind that made you jump at shadows and question every sound. They had always been the apex predators, the hunters at the top of the food chain. Now they were learning what it felt like to be prey. Kira let one hunter escape from each encounter. She let them flee back to their companions with stories of the demon in the darkness. The soft skin who appeared from nowhere and vanished without a trace. The survivors gathered in the central chamber, a large cavern where they thought they could defend themselves. Vorath counted his remaining forces. 18 hunters still standing, but many of them were injured or terrified. "She is just one creature," he shouted. "We are Vractari warriors. We do not fear prey." But his words rang hollow in the echoing cave, and his hunters gripped their weapons with trembling claws. That night, Kira set fire to a pile of vegetation at one of the cave entrances. The smoke poured into the tunnel network, filling the chambers with choking haze. The Vractari had to choose between suffocating in darkness or retreating to the surface. They chose retreat. Kira followed them out. The hunting moon had 3 moons of its own, and they cast silver light across the jungle landscape. The surviving Vractari stumbled through the undergrowth, their formation broken, their confidence shattered. Vorath tried to rally them, but they would not listen. They had entered those caves as proud hunters, and they had emerged as beaten survivors. And somewhere in the darkness behind them, she was still coming. Kira tracked them through the night, using skills that her ancestors had perfected over 200,000 years of evolution. She did not need to see them. She could follow broken branches, disturbed soil, and the scent of alien blood. She caught up with Vorath near the extraction point. He turned to face her, raising his plasma lance with desperate fury. Here at last was his enemy. Small, covered in mud and ash, holding an empty pistol that clicked uselessly when she pulled the trigger. "Your weapon is empty, Softskin," Vorath snarled. "You have nothing left." Kira dropped the useless pistol and drew something from behind her back. A bone, sharpened to a razor point. It was a femur, taken from one of his fallen warriors. "I have everything I need," she replied. Vorath lunged at her with all his predatory speed, plasma lance swinging in a deadly arc. He was faster than her, stronger than her, bigger than her. But Kira had trained soldiers to fight opponents exactly like this. She did not try to match his strength. She redirected it, stepping aside at the last instant and letting his momentum carry him past her. The sharpened bone found the gap between his scales, sliding between his ribs and into vital organs. Vorath fell to his knees, amber eyes wide with disbelief. "What are you?" he whispered. Kira looked down at him without hatred, without triumph, without any emotion at all. She was a survivor, and she did what survivors did. "I am human," she said simply. "And your hunt is over." She took his plasma lance and watched as the remaining Vractari fled toward the extraction shuttle. They had come with 30 warriors. Fewer than 10 would return. The cameras had recorded everything, and on the flagship above, Huntmaster Krassix watched in horrified silence. This was no longer a hunt. This was a massacre. And the human was not running toward safety. She was following the survivors toward the extraction point. She was going to board his ship. The extraction shuttle rose into the night sky with its cargo of broken hunters, and Kira Voss was hiding in the maintenance compartment beneath the cargo bay. She had studied the shuttle during her time in the holding cell, memorizing its layout through brief glimpses. She knew where the access hatches were located, and she knew that the Vractari would be too, traumatized to check for stowaways. The shuttle docked with the flagship, and the survivors stumbled out into the loading bay. Kira waited until they had cleared the area, then slipped through an emergency hatch into the lower decks. The ship was larger than she expected, a massive vessel designed to support extended hunting expeditions across multiple star systems. She moved through the corridors like a ghost, avoiding patrols and security cameras, always heading upward toward the command levels. Alarms began to sound throughout the ship. "Security breach on Deck 7, a voice announced. "The prey has infiltrated the vessel. All personnel to combat stations." Kira smiled grimly and kept moving. Let them hunt her through their own ship. She had 17 kilometers of jungle practice behind her. Metal corridors would be easy by comparison. The Vrakthari crew responded with overwhelming force, sending teams to sweep every deck, every compartment, every maintenance shaft. But they were used to hunting in open terrain, not confined spaces. They kept getting in each other's way, and their communications were confused by overlapping reports. Kira used their chaos against them. She disabled power conduits to create darkness in key sections. She triggered false alarms to draw security teams away from her actual location. She found the ventilation system and flooded a crew deck with smoke from burning insulation. And every minute she was learning more about the ship, identifying its weak points, understanding its systems. The path to the bridge became clear in her mind. Huntmaster Krasix stood on the command deck, watching the chaos unfold on his monitors. His ship was in disarray, his crew was terrified, and one human female was somehow evading hundreds of armed warriors. "Seal the bridge," he ordered. "Lock down all access points." His officers scrambled to comply, but the main door was already opening. Kira walked onto the bridge with a plasma lance in her hands, the same weapon she had taken from War Chief Varth. She was covered in mud and blood and ash, her clothing torn, her face hard with exhaustion and determination. Behind her, the corridor was littered with unconscious bodies and damaged equipment. The bridge crew froze in their stations, none of them willing to be the first to challenge this nightmare creature. Krasix stepped forward, his claws flexing at his sides. He was old, but he was still a hunter, still dangerous. "You cannot escape this ship," he said. "Even if you kill everyone on this bridge, you will never leave alive." "I am not here to escape," Kira replied. "I am here to deliver a message." She walked past him to the main communication console, keeping her weapon ready but not aimed at anyone in particular. The bridge crew watched her with wide amber eyes, too frightened to move. "You have holding cells on this ship," Kira continued. "I passed them on my way here. There are other prisoners inside, other species you have taken for your hunts." Krasix said nothing. It was true. "You will release them," Kira said. "All of them. And you will provide them with escape pods and navigation data to return to their home worlds." "And if I refuse?" Kira turned to face him with eyes that held no mercy and no doubt. "Then I will kill everyone on this bridge, take control of your ship, and release them myself. I have studied your systems during my journey through your corridors. I understand them well enough. It will take longer, but the result will be the same." Krasix measured her with his predator's gaze, calculating odds, assessing threats. Everything in his experience told him that one creature could not defeat an entire ship. But everything in his experience had told him that one creature could not defeat 30 hunters either. "What else do you demand?" he asked finally. "A transmission," Kira said. "Broadcast across every frequency your communication array can reach. Send it to every Vrakthari colony, every outpost, every ship in your fleet." "What transmission?" Kira moved to the console and began entering commands. The main screen displayed sensor data from the hunting moon. Hours of footage showing her traps, her ambush, her systematic destruction of the hunting party. "This is what one human did to your finest warriors," she said. "One human with a crude pistol and 6 bullets. Now imagine what happens when you encounter more of us." She turned to address Crasix directly, and her voice carried the weight of 200,000 years of human survival. "You looked at my species and saw prey. You saw creatures without claws or fangs, without scales or venom, and you assumed we were weak. But you made a mistake that every predator eventually makes. You confused physical weapons with actual danger." She stepped closer, and the ancient hunter actually stepped back. "Humans do not survive because we are strong. We survive because we adapt. We learn. We teach each other. Every generation passes down everything they know to the next, and the next generation adds more. That is what human trained means. It means we carry the accumulated survival knowledge of our entire species." Kira reached into her pocket and pulled out a small device. A data chip containing her personnel file. "My training record," she explained. 12 years as a survival instructor. I taught soldiers to stay alive on 17 different worlds. And I was not exceptional. There are millions of humans who receive similar training." She inserted the chip into the console and watched the data scroll across the screen. "Your transmission will include all of this information. You will tell every Vrac-3 colony exactly what humans are and exactly what we can do. And you will include one final message." "What message?" Kira smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. "We train them all like this. There are 8 billion more." The transmission went out across the void, carrying footage of the massacre and data on human capabilities. Every Vrac-3 who received it would understand the same terrible truth. They were not the apex predators of this galaxy. They had simply never met humans before. Crasix released the prisoners as commanded, members of a dozen species who had been waiting their turn in the proving. They stared at Kira with a mixture of fear and wonder as they boarded the escape pods. "What are you?" one of them asked. A small creature with soft fur and trembling hands. Kira placed a gentle hand on its shoulder. "A survivor," she said. "Just like you." She watched the pods launch toward distant stars, carrying hope and freedom to species who had expected only death. Behind her, the Vrac-3 stood in defeated silence. Their empire had ruled this sector for 10,000 cycles. They had hunted every species they encountered and added trophies to their halls. Now they understood that those days were over. Somewhere in the galaxy, there was a species that trained its children to survive anything. A species that refused to accept death, that adapted to every environment, that turned every disadvantage into a weapon. The humans were coming, and the galaxy would never be the same. Kiravus commandeered a small shuttle and set a course for the nearest human outpost. She had been given one gun and no escape. She was leaving with a stolen ship and a promise fulfilled. The Vrac-3 watched her go, and for the first time in their long history, they felt something they had never needed to feel before. Fear.